Welcome to the Counsel Code. I'm Charles 𝐀𝐟𝐭, and at Volody, we're building an AI-powered platform that helps legal teams intelligently automate, scale safely, and maintain control. Our goal is to bring clarity, speed, and insight to contracts. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Scott Penick, Director of Legal for KION North America. Scott brings a wealth of experience and a unique commercial legal perspective, balancing operational scale, supply chains, and risk in complex manufacturing environments. Scott, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks a lot, Charles. I appreciate being here. We got some beautiful weather in Summerville, South Carolina, which is where KION North America is headquartered for our U.S. headquarters. Excited to discuss the topics today, Charles. Thanks for having me.
Super. Before we do a deep dive, I'd love for listeners to hear about your journey, how you ended up in the in-house legal world, and what your mandate is at KION North America. What's keeping you up at night from a legal perspective in your role?
Sure. So, unlike what I envisioned, would happen, it certainly wasn't a straight line journey to where I've ended up. But after law school in New York City, I went to what we call in the legal world big law. So very large 700 attorney law firm downtown in the financial district in Manhattan. My timing was off. Ended up being there right before the great financial crisis hit. So being in mortgage-backed securities was not the place to be at that time, as those of us who lived through it might remember. So ended up recreating my career at a boutique law firm in New Jersey. Spent 12 years there after all of that. And so about 15 years or so in the private practice world before going in-house at KION North America. Happens to be in my hometown, which I moved back to, of Summerville, South Carolina. So really excited to be here, be part of the team that is getting business done, not just being that outside legal consultant anymore, which just wasn't quite as fulfilling for me. So good to be on the inside and teaming up with my client now, essentially.
Impressive background, impressive journey.
Yeah.
So as we start, maybe some background. The legal tech and AI space is moving fast. It is clearly accelerated over the last several years with the advent of tools like what Volody provides.
Mm-hmm.
According to multiple trend reports, AI is no longer optional in legal workflows. It's becoming a baseline expectation, and frankly, it's a mandate. At the same time, there's warnings about overhype, metrics that aren't aligned, expectations that are unreasonable, and risk of, for lack of a better description, hallucinations or AI fabrications in legal outputs, such as that high-profile case in California, where an attorney faced sanctions for citing false quotes generated by AI. From your vantage at KION, what legal tech and AI trends are you watching most closely? Which ones excite you, and which ones worry you?
Sure. The ones I'm watching, which I haven't seen anyone 100% do yet, waiting for that true red lines contract itself tool, right? So contract redlining is when attorneys exchange documents usually back and forth and edit them, trying to come to a meeting of the minds that comes close to our policy, right, on certain, and our practices and our playbook for commercial agreements usually, so that, we believe we can, one, meet the requirements of the contract, it's going to be profitable, good agreement for us. So those redlining tools are, I think, one of the hardest things to develop. So I'm watching that because I think that's going to be the next phase. I've seen a lot of claims, but I haven't seen one that I think is, truly can work on its own now. Be great. Also, so the ones I've seen, you have to sort of do a lot of work, essentially to load your playbook in or whatnot to get them to start working perfectly. So I guess that's kind of the holy grail of AI for commercial contracts, at least. I think the risk on AI that I see is similar to that case in California, right? People get lazy and they are trusting the tool to do all of the work. And right now, I look at it as a tool, as an assistant. It can really speed up the process of whether it's reviewing agreements, doing research, assessing trends in your contracts across multiple customers and things like that. So it's a great tool. The risk is that people rely on the outputs without checking them, presumably that more than one attorney have done out there and resulted in sanctions, citing cases that they didn't go back and check and make sure were real. So that's definitely a risk. I think the longer term risk, to be honest, is that attorneys start losing their discernment and mental edge, right? Because they are relying on a tool and not thinking through it and not checking it, right? I mean, our brains are like muscles, sort of that use it or lose it. You don't lose it, it gets mushy, it gets slow, it just less smart versus actually continuing to sort of stay engaged and find that sort of next level challenge for ourselves. So I think that's the longer term risk. I don't know if there may be some real versus hype issues out there too. Very real is data extraction and sort of bulk analysis. I can being able to put 100 contracts into a tool and get data out across those agreements is fantastic. I mean, that could be multi-week project for multiple people to take on, and now one person can do it, runs in the background for minutes, less. I mean, it still takes a little bit of time, but it's essentially instant compared to the old world or the old way of doing it. So that's a fantastic tool. I think that's great. The hype, kind of like what I've said, I don't think there's actually anything that replaces an attorney. That's the big scare. People are going to lose their jobs. We're not going to need attorneys anymore. I haven't seen anything yet that would replace a good attorney, I will say, that can really do all the redlining by itself, that can take a business question, understand the legal implications, and spit out advice that is actionable and reliable. So I think that's the hype. We're not there yet. It's a great tool. There are a lot of great features to AI. It just speeds up your ability. It does mean we need less headcount because one person can do more. But anyway, that's where I see it right now.
We concur. Our tool isn't designed to replace attorneys. It's made to enable them to do their jobs better, faster, and with greater accuracy and reducing risk. So with that said, in many companies, CLM projects stall or they never fully deliver value, plausibly due to misaligned expectations up on the front. From your experience, what are the root causes? Organizational, technical, cultural? That trip up to the CLM initiatives before they even take off is part of the journey. So right. Do you see those projects stalling or from the perspective of a customer, they don't perceive it as having delivered the value they thought?
Yeah, I think it's usually some combination of organizational and cultural, less so than technical, assuming that you've done some decent due diligence on the tool's capabilities and the company really can deliver and the demos really were legit, right? It's not a technical issue. Usually it's cultural. You're changing the way people do their job. And you're not just changing the way the legal department does its job. You need other people really to participate to get the full benefits out of these tools. So if you haven't sort of sold the value, not just in the legal department, because we had a budget to buy software this year and it was enough to get this tool, but sell the value to the commercial team, how it provides them more visibility, how you're going to be able to turn contracts faster, close deals faster, and make that first customer impression a great one, right? Like, how easy is it to do business with this supplier or vendor? We're a lot easier to do business with when we can turn contracts quickly, move to final agreements quickly. So selling commercial, I think, is probably one of the most important, because that's the lifeblood of a company, right? Is sales. If you're not closing sales, you're not in business, right? So you need people outside of the legal department to get involved. And I think one of the other things probably that can happen is trying to do too much at once rather than a phased process. Like let's look for some easy victories first, show everybody that it can work, get comfortable with a less complex agreement. NDAs are one of the classic ones I think that people talk about a lot, and they can take up a lot of time. So if they can efficiently turn, also that helps, right? Continue the conversation with the customer more quickly. The faster that NDA gets closed out, right? We can keep talking. I mean, that's the last thing you want, is can't even get an NDA signed off on because of whatever reason, and you can't even continue the conversation with the customer. You know what? But somebody else could, and now the conversation's going on. So I think it's this sort of cultural, you need the buy-in even outside of the legal department and within. People are going to have to do their jobs a new way. That's always a challenge. So you need input, I think, up front. You need some selling up front on the value, and you've got to keep talking about it, right? And I think one of the things too that happens, right, with any new process, but including this, is if it doesn't become a measurable KPI for someone, if they can ignore it without consequence and they just decide to do their job the old way, I think that's something that a lot of businesses need to consider as well, is that this is actually going to be a measurable KPI for you, legal department. Probably harder to get sales team to buy into that, but at least on the legal side, let's say it can be a KPI, right? Are you using the tool, right? Or are you circumventing the tool? And so having some way to measure that as well, that actually means there's we want carrots, not sticks, to keep us moving. But sometimes you need to there's going to be an uncomfortable conversation if you're not using the tool, right? Because we're actually measuring this, and it's actually something that you are expected to do as part of your job criteria. So I think it's usually that, right? It's this organizational and cultural issues that are going to keep any new process, right? Everyone knows this from sort of change management. This is a change management issue. It's not just a new fancy tool. So I think you've got to get that in your minds as a company. Find a good partner to help you implement it as well, because this is a tool that this is the first time a company's done it. But there are expert implementers out there who've done it for multiple companies who can come in and help you. So I think you can't skimp on that either. It's not just the software budget, but you need that implementer and coach to help you with the processes and to sort of keep it going and take all the learnings that they have from other customers, since this is the first time most customers are doing it, right? Because if you have a good tool, you do it once and then you update and upgrade, right? But it's just sort of iterative. So if you're doing something for the first time, you need a guide to help you do it well. So I think that's another thing that if companies don't do, they're gonna buy a really expensive tool that is probably not going to get implemented. And if it doesn't get implemented, there's not going to be any, successful outcomes from it. So.
Very well stated. And for those listeners, what Scott just went through was a lot, but it was spot on. You sort of answered my next two questions, but I'll ask them anyway.
Sure.
Hit on the change management and the cultural issue. Our tool works. We know that. The biggest impediment we see to change is change management. People just want to keep doing the things that they already do. You touched on sales. I don't want to pick on them, but change in sales is sometimes challenging. And using a new tool can be a challenge because it's a new interface. Frankly, all of us sometimes resist change. So how do you assess a team's readiness for CLM? I mean, what steps did you go through, or what steps would you suggest from an upfront readiness assessment, and then addressing maybe the barriers?
Yeah, sure. The readiness would go somewhat to, I think you need to develop readiness upfront a little bit, right? So that's the getting input. I think that input's probably going to inform you how hard the implementation's going to be from a cultural perspective, right? If you're getting a lot of input from people that's very negative, or a, we don't need this, then you know you're going to have more of an uphill battle. It's something you need to think about. So that's going to give you a lot of insight. And then I think you also need to do some selling internally and see if you can get people to come around who are maybe hard sells, for example, on the readiness side. Other things we're in the process of doing this right now as a company. So I can only talk about red flags I've heard about rather than I've seen, because like I said, usually, unless you've changed companies or are an implementer or a consultant, you've only gone through implementation one time, right? So and I can't say I've seen a lot of red flags, but I think red flags would be, people already having problems with processes in your company. If you're a company that's not already working well within processes and sort of have a cultural problem of people going around the process, you're probably going to have a harder time with this as well. And you really need to prepare, for a long implementation period, I think, with an outside partner who can help walk you through it. If you've got a team that doesn't seem to be interested in it, that already has a hard time following processes, right? Like you're probably not going to get the benefits that you're hoping to get out of the system just because the leader thinks it's a good tool. The board says, well, our legal's got to do this. All the cutting edge legal teams are using AI. Why don't we have an AI tool? And you just want to run out and get a software program to sort of meet the board's expectations. Well, you're still not really meeting their expectations, right, if the implementation fails. So those sorts of things, I think, would be items to look out for and try to turn around before you spend the money, invest in the program.
Again, well stated. And you pretty much answered this question, but if you had to zone in on one red flag, is change readiness, is embracement of the potential solution using the tool, because the tool is an enabler, or maybe is your data so poor? What would be the big red flag that you'd say, hey, look, we need to take a step back and maybe spend another month getting ready for this, as opposed to we're going to start deploying. Is there one area? You touched on many. We agree with some. We've seen them. So is there one red flag that maybe we could advise companies to take an extra couple of weeks and get everybody on the sled before we launch?
I think if you don't have clearly defined processes for contract procedures, sort of like intake, review, approval, matrices, and things like that, then a lot of the functions of these CLM tools are not going to be very useful to your organization, because you don't have any process already on top of and to sort of adapt to the tool, right? All you're giving maybe is your attorney a little bit fancier redlining tool and a tool where they can answer questions about contracts a little more quickly, which is really not the bang for your buck that you're trying to get here. So if you don't already have a process in place for those sorts of things, I would say you need to meet internally, figure out how a contract should move through your company, we'll call it manually, and then you're going to be better prepared, I think, to successfully start the implementation of a CLM. But again, that process needs buy-in from other business partners, not just the legal team, but other business partners. So not having buy-in, not having the process, and not having the right buy-in on the process from your other business partners, like your commercial team, you should work on that first, or you're going to have a very expensive tool that you're not able to fully utilize, probably.
We agree, and part of that statement supports, or that point of view supports our emphasis on pilot first and modular rollout. just starting small and then demonstrating the value early and continuing to gain buy-in and acceptance so that the path forward becomes easier to deploy on a function by function perspective or across multiple organizational silos. So we help teams assess their maturity, and one of the things we do is try to understand, what do you do today and why? That workflow, who approves what are your business practices? If you're buying something for over $50,000, does it need to get moved through a different approval cycle versus $10,000? And many companies we work with, they aren't clear on how that's defined. It's subjective in many cases, and that's not a knock on how they do business, but that's just the realities. Our tools are designed to help companies assess what they're currently doing and then blend what they want to do into the tool. So we prefer to do this on a modular basis, and you've said that in an earlier discussion on this podcast. So we're in agreement. Let me shift a little bit to data. Contracts serialize enormous amounts of data. We use metadata tags to flag customer control data, individual words, keywords, sentences, etc. But many teams never unlock the power of that data. In your role, how do you think about extracting insights or metrics from contracting? And equally as important, how do you measure cycle times, bottlenecks? We put a workflow in place and it's sitting in somebody's to-do list for days. Or clause usage. We are big champions of standard templates, standard clauses, and are people really using them?
I think that one of the greatest value sources, I guess, from this data unlock is for legal to be able to align with other departments within the company. We can now quickly take and compile data and speak with the finance department and the CFO, right, to sort of show impact. Either get buy-in or either say, CFO might be like, wow, I didn't know that we agreed to terms like that so often and things like that. It's also a great tool. You want to talk about cycle time. If you can show a decreasing cycle time to the commercial department, those guys are going to support using the tool on the sort of intake side, getting their customers to the extent, they need to sort of cooperate with the process as well. Though most of the tools I see are very customer friendly, it's more on the inside, how we're going to use it and make a good use of it. But I always think about teaming with finance and the great information that you can now gather out of all of your contracts or all of a certain type of contract, right? And team up with finance and also team up with the commercial side of the organization with a lot of real data, not just anecdotal, this is what it feels like happens all the time, but go with real data to them to either ensure legal is aligned with what their desires and needs are for the company, or also just to partner with them to strategize, right? Because now we have some real data to make decisions on. I was literally having this conversation recently with my CEO. It was like, you gotta make decisions based on real data, not mushy, salesy kind of marketing type internal communications, right? We need to be able to exchange real data together to make decisions. So it's a great tool for being able to access that data to make decisions. So that's how I think of using sort of that side of a tool, a CLM tool.
So you hit on several of the metrics, but let's just reiterate what metrics matter the most. Cycle times you mentioned. Yeah. Are there others that matter internally to executives, to your stakeholders? And we agree that, data is fact, okay? It's not, it feels good. We can demonstrate through our dashboards, cycle times used to take 10 days just to close a contract. Now, some of that could be on the customer side in a sales order mode, but some of it is also due to internal inaction. So cycle time is one metric. Any others that, pop up?
I don't know if this is the kind of metric you're looking for, but when we're pulling the data out of the agreements, things like payment terms, like how many days, right? I love all my commercial sales guys, but they don't seem to care too much if it's net 30 or net 90. They just want the deal closed, right? But that has a big impact on the cash flow and that cash conversion cycle for the company, right? And days outstanding. And so being able to track those sort of metrics that are beyond price. Like everybody talks about sort of like price and volume, right? We always talk about that, but there's so many other things in a complex business world that really impact whether a deal is profitable or how profitable a deal is for a company. And so one that I just always think of that just doesn't get enough attention in some groups is our payment terms. How quickly are we going to get cash, right, in the company? So that's one, and being able to pull that data out of contracts, see what we're really doing versus what our targets are for, say, cash conversion. That's great to be able to do that, rather than sort of an anecdotal feel like, no, hey, this is really what we're agreeing to a lot. Is this okay? Or do we need to push harder on this term because, this is sort of our cost of capital. And so when we're not getting it back for an extra 30 days, it's actually costing us this much. And so it's trimming the margin on the deal, all of that, those sorts of things that sometimes get ignored.
We agree. Another area we see customers not having a full suite of intelligence on are obligations, terms and conditions beyond payment terms. For example, I'm obligated to deliver product within a number of days.
Yes.
I couldn't do that if I tried, but they're not aware of it.
Right.
Because they haven't looked at these contracts. And, again, this isn't a knock on sales. We're all very sales oriented. But when we make or we sign a contract with an obligation that we can't even adhere to on the front end, we're already setting ourselves up.
Right.
Have you ever used, or has your firm used, or considered AI or analytic tools to help visualize? I mean, beyond the CLM implementation, has AI been part and parcel of maybe the fabric of your analytical tool suite inside your company?
Not a ton. What I have done is use the tools I have it's not super visual, but at least to create tables and charts that make things more digestible. So I do have some tools already that I've been using for over a year that can quickly digest and compare agreements and create a table, for example, that makes it very easy to go through key terms, which just it speeds up the process. It's a lot faster way. That's one of the things that honestly I'm going to need to learn more about, because especially for quick decision making, some of those visual tools just resonate more with decision makers. So being able to share information in a way that is more meaningful, speaks to the way they think and learn, and just conveys more information faster is important. So it's something I haven't used enough yet.
And one of our strengths is that built-in analysis. We're big on visualization. Humans can't assimilate or have difficulty assimilating long rows and columns of data. So we present information in a visual manner that is easy to drill down into, using, for example, AI-enabled clause usage, exception tracking, predictive suggestions. Again, the AI tool is not making a decision, it's making a suggestion, but it's visualized. So our goal is that legal teams, they don't just manage the contracts, they learn from them. And again, this is an emphasis on, we're not replacing legal teams. We're better enabling them. And visualization is big to us. So we're in agreement on that, and that's one of the strengths of the Volody tool. So AI is creeping into drafting, reviewing, redlining, risk scoring, and the question always comes up, Should it be an autopilot or should it be a copilot? You've touched on this earlier.
Yeah.
From your lens, we have a point of view on this, but I'd rather hear it from you because you're the customer, and it's better to hear from the ones using it and the legal experts as opposed to the tool suppliers like Volody, who is a market leader. But from your lens, how should legal teams strike the balance between it's a copilot assistant or it's an autopilot?
Yeah, I think mostly it's got to be a copilot, right? I have heard of some organizations putting certain agreements on autopilot. I think you could possibly test that. The problem is if you're testing it, that means you do need to put human eyes on it again, right?
Yeah.
To see how good it is, right? On things like NDAs. Now that depends on what kind of organization you are, right? If you're a life sciences company, NDAs are probably more critical to you than, say, a manufacturer of material handling equipment and forklifts, which is what we are, right? Because that is, all your data and IP is truly your lifeblood if you're a life sciences company, right? So I think it's possible to put some simple agreements on autopilot, but you're still going to have to put some guardrails around that. For the most part, I think it's a great co-pilot or just assistant to an attorney that just, I've used the tools that help me learn something faster, way faster, to get a great, using a research, not a CLM tool, but get a great memo on it that has real references that I actually check, unlike some of these people turning in citations to courts that they didn't check. But we're turning it in, which to me, I mean, that's against our, professional rules of responsibility and ethics, to not check cases. I checked real cases when I used to do some litigation, but that I saw that before I turned it in and make sure the law hadn't changed. This case hasn't been overturned or something. So different topic, but I think it's mostly an assistant right now, and it's a great assistant, but still requires an attorney doing the work. It just makes us faster, I think, and better, and gives you extra ideas. Gives me new things to think about. Then I'll see a suggestion from an AI tool. And I'm like, okay, wow, I didn't think about that. Do I like it? Do I not? Is that something I need to add or include here? But it's kind of like also a partner to bounce ideas off of as well. So it can be. So,
well stated. From an autopilot perspective, the Volody tool, based on customer input, customer clause libraries, can autopilot generate a pro forma contract. But
Sure.
that pro forma contract, we concur, still needs to be reviewed by legal and adjusted prior to submission with a customer. I think you've touched on this, but again, I'll reiterate a question. Where do you see AI reliably adding value? And where does that oversight continue to come into play? And you probably answered this, but I just want to summarize it maybe for some of the listeners.
Yeah. I mean, it's reliably adding value in research, again, always with that double checking. It's also been adding a lot of value for me in analysis of existing documents or groups of documents. It can review them so much faster and pull data out of them and sort of organize the data, right, much faster than I could do it with my own eyes and reading time, right? So those are some great tools already. It's making great suggestions on reviewing. I'll put a clause in and, sometimes be like, okay, make some recommendations for me so that this is more supplier friendly, for example, or something, to just make sure what ideas am I maybe not thinking of. So using it as sort of an assistant like that has been, to me, reliable. Again, I always got to check the accuracy. I mean, the hallucination issue is real. I mean, I've had people use an AI tool to ask the liquidated damages cap in a tool, and it will give an answer, and then they came back and said, I thought it was this percent because they remember the deal, and then the tool was like, oh, good catch, you're right, it is. Like, well, what if you had not known that and check? So, so there's still, you got to be careful, depending on how important the information it is that you're trying to pull out and the action you're going to take relying on that information. There's still a lot of double checking that has to go on, but it definitely accelerates a lot of work. Yeah.
I'm going to touch on guardrails, and I'll preface it by, at Volody, our large language model is your language. It's not the universe of legal language. Mm-hmm. And our vector scoring database is owned by you, meaning you assign values to risk. Some clauses may not be as risky to you as others, or some keywords. So how would you architect guardrails in that scenario? Again, we're not looking at the universe of legal documents that are, in place across the globe. We're looking at your language because that's what matters. So, how would you see these guardrails being architected inside of your company?
Yeah. Well, not having the technical expertise to answer on that part, but from the sort of just practical conceptual side, letting the tool learn from a playbook, right, of very key terms that need to be reviewed and what's acceptable, and sort of letting it learn from a playbook. I think it also would be great if it could learn from prior negotiated agreements, right, through iterations of red lines that you could feed from an original draft, and then the stages in between, presumably the comments that are left by the company's attorney, and the final agreement that we reached across a good sampling of agreements to see, how does this company really do business? What does it really find important? What terms is it willing to give on? So, man, if a tool could establish policies and guardrails based on that kind of analysis, because teams already have that, right? A legal team is already going to be able to provide that to the system without a ton of legwork on the customer side, if you're implementing a new tool. So to me, that would be a way to sort of train, the same way you would train a new attorney, frankly, right? Here's our playbook. Here's some agreements that you can look at, and how we reach the final agreement. Look through some of the red lines in my comments. Come back to me with questions if you have any. Because there can be outside issues, like, why did we agree to this on this occasion, and things like that. But, if you could train it like that, I think that would be a good way to get some guardrails into the system.
Well, we certainly have those capabilities, and they're still maturing. I don't want to say we're just in the early stages of AI enablement, but clearly every quarter, every 6 months, every year, we're adding learning capabilities and clearly looking at some of the things you just identified. To be able to assimilate all that data and then present it back to an attorney in a meaningful manner where action can be taken, or at least a decision can be made. So our tool suggests clauses or flag risks, but we always maintain user control, lawyer control, sales control for those clauses that they're accountable for. We also keep version history, source citations, comments, as you suggested, and explanations. So we do have these capabilities that ensure trust and auditability, but it's great to hear that those are key items that you look for to assist in your journey as an attorney, managing a lot of contracts, both on the sales and the procurement side. So when you evaluate CLM or legal tech vendors, or when any companies do, too many, in our opinion, focus on a feature checklist. That's just a point of view. At the end of the day, a feature checklist to us, everybody's going to say, yes, I can do that. That's the bottom line. From your experience, what criteria should be non-negotiable when selecting a CLM partner?
Yeah. I think that's going to be company by company, right, basis. But important things, in my opinion, are: is there an AI-assisted redlining tool? I mean, to me, that's sort of table stakes these days. Understand that those are still being developed and getting better over time, and have to be trained on our playbook or whatever. So I think that's key. It's got to be controllable from like an approval requirements checklist, right? Like escalating approvals. So that's one of the ways to put guardrails in, right? Is somebody's not at a certain level, they can't sign off on X dollars, built into the system. So some way to control approvals in it, and also the data that can be pulled out. How easy is it to? I feel like a lot of the tools they offer or state that they offer a lot of the same features, which they don't, but then it's like, how user friendly are those? How intuitive is the tool? Because that's part of the implementation. That's where technology will become a barrier to implementation if it's not a very user friendly and intuitive tool. So you got to see the tool and see, is this intuitive? Is this going to be easy to use as well? I mean, that's a short feature checklist. Like you said, a lot of times there are features on there like, I can't even envision using that. That's great. I don't know. Tell me how I would use that and get any value out of it. Right. So, sort of controllable, does the redlining, it has approval controls in there for kind of the guardrails on who can sign off on what, and escalations and things like that. And then, just a great tool to extract the data out as well, and visualize, which is the thing I haven't really done a lot of yet, and don't have a lot of experience with yet. But visualizing that data, love seeing tools that have that, because then that makes it so much easier to speak with your business partners about the impacts of the contract on the business, whether they're meeting the sort of criteria and expectations of finance, sales, or whatever department that you're in business with together. So
we concur. Visualization is big for us. The user experience is even bigger. If our tool isn't easy to work with, if the user interface isn't intuitive, that's a challenge during implementation. Resistance comes into play. It's like, I can't understand this. I can't work with it. I'm not working with it. I'm going to do everything the way I used to.
Yeah.
So let me ask this question. How much weight do you give to implementation support, domain expertise, not necessarily domain expertise on legal language, because we don't provide that. That you own the legal language, but domain expertise in, say, workflows, approvals, business practices, and then maybe a product roadmap alignment that includes your other systems. We didn't touch on this earlier, but for example, there could be a sales contract that has terms in it that you can't meet, or terms in it that distribution's not even aware of. So, the term might be, I have to full ship everything, and distribution's partial shipping. So you're already in violation of a term. How much implementation support are you leaning on the vendor for, and how do you weight that?
I think it's really critical up front, or you're honestly probably never going to truly take off on the implementation. But to me, understanding how quickly that process can work, how cumbersome it is, one of the key things that I've learned through research and looking at these tools from other internal partners is how important it is to be partnering with internal IT to understand how the potential platform and tool that you're going to be bringing in works with existing systems. If your intention is for things to work seamlessly with procurement or sales or another department in the company, account finance, right? Like, how seamlessly is this tool going to work with our other tools? Talk to them. For example, whatever your CRM tool is that the sales team is using, does this talk to that tool? Because that's where sales lives all day, right? So things like that, and a team that has experience implementing successfully with other companies, that's hugely important as well, because if they already understand the kinds of roadblocks that tend to come up and the kinds of practices that tend to result in high adoption rates, right, within the company and people using the tool with less friction, then that's huge. That's really important. If you have the greatest tool in the world but nobody's using it, then it's just wasted money, right? So if you can't implement it well, then it really doesn't matter what the features are and how powerful it is, because you're not going to be able to use it. It's not going to get used. So
your words are near and dear to our heart. We pride ourselves on providing support throughout the life cycle of implementation and even after implementation. When customers come back to us with questions of, could we improve in this area, that area, or could you add maybe a new feature? Although our suite is fully featured, we're always open to suggestions. So you kind of answered this, but from a strong vendor-client relationship, what dynamics come into play more than technology? You've hit on many of the points we embrace: change management, organizational change, inclusion of cross-functional resources. But how do you see that, those dynamics maybe playing out in the best vendor-customer relationship?
Well, speed is important, right? Speed, because this is on top of somebody's day job, right? Learning to use a new tool, so to speak, right? And getting it up and running. So, how quickly can you help get the system up and running? How quickly can you digest all of our existing agreements so that we can extract data from them? How user-friendly is that process? How quickly does the vendor respond to questions and issues, right? Because that's another issue, that's another potential problem that's going to lead people to stop using the tool. If it's not working today and I have to get the contract turned back today, then guess what? I'm doing it the old way. You know what I mean? So those sorts of things, like responsiveness, tools always up and working, how smoothly it works with your existing tools, which I kind of already addressed. Those are the important things. Those are hard to know. You can agree to those up front, but before you're in the relationship. So that's where I think having a track record and some customer referrals that you can go talk to and have honest conversations with them about what the process was like for them, what were the hiccups, how easily were they resolved. The more sort of, without being a competitor, of course, but similar business that customers in, for us, some kind of production and manufacturing company, be very interested to talk to someone like that about how well it worked and how it's changed their program. So, those are things important to us, or to me. Yeah.
Excellent. We at Volody have a mindset of, building a legal first team. Our point of view is legal is, in a racing model, accountable for all contracts. There are many other organizations or cross-functional leaders that are responsible. But at the end of the day, we take a legal first mindset, but also embrace close collaboration across the organization, because there are other entities that are involved. And they have to be, on board and embracing the solution. So to us, we co-create workflows, but accountability lands with legal, as well as the administration of the tool on a go-forward basis. IT's still involved, but operationally, legal has to be, from our point of view, the owner. So we focus on aligning incentives, setting realistic expectations, and then going through that phased implementation cycle. Without getting into the oft overused, crawl, walk, run, it is a phased implementation. And there are many different ways to embrace that sort of implementation, but all of this in our mind is focused on embracing success, where you've got an end state that you wish to get to, and there are many steps in between.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you questions. What's one underrated metric that CLM possibly provides today, but could be ignored?
I think one really important metric is that front end implementation, how fast that happens. The other one I would say, which is a little bit hard to measure, is user friendly. It's so important. I don't know how easy to measure that is, you know, how user friendly something is, but frankly, if that's not there, then the other metrics don't matter, because the tool's not going to get used. So, but I think what people tend to look at are all the fancy features that look really cool and smart and everything. And sometimes it comes back to understanding basic human tendencies and habits. And this is a new process and a new tool for people to use. So how quickly does it get up and running, and how easy is it to use? You know,
we concur. We agree with the practical realities as opposed to the sizzle and I don't know, it looks good. What's the worst habit legal teams should stop now? Tough question, but you know, what's a bad habit that they should stop embracing?
I think it is really tempting to treat everything as a one-off, and to almost like reinventing the wheel too often, right? And that's one of the things I think that a CLM tool helps eliminate, actually, is standardizing a little bit more, right? Everyone doing it a little bit their own way, almost like a starting from scratch. A lot of lawyers seem to have a habit of doing that. If you spent a lot of years in a law firm world where billable hours were the measuring stick, then there's really not a ton of incentive to be fast, quite frankly. So because you got to hit a certain number of billable hours, right? Now, from a client perspective, and definitely on the in-house side, the client being my employer and company, speed and consistency of terms and output, that's really important. So let's stop treating things as one-off. Let's stop doing things differently among different members of the team to the extent that's happening, and let's start standardizing processes and templates and that sort of thing. So.
Another tough question, but hopefully simple. What tool can't you live without? What tool is it, besides email? And that's one of the things, by the way, we're trying to use the tool to reduce emailing documents back and forth. With our central database, we're trying to eliminate, never will, but that's one thing our tool does provide, because it has that central database where everybody can interact in real time. But what other tool can't you live without beside email?
The simplest one right up front is Microsoft Word. You live in that as an attorney, really, who's dealing with contracts. That's why, to be honest, some of the best tools are the ones that implement well with Word. You spent 20 years using that tool, and as it iterates and changes or whatever. So, when something integrates well where you're already working, again, that sort of removes a barrier. So I always look at that with tools, like, do they make me work in their software that looks new and different and maybe doesn't have those formatting features and all the little things we're used to doing in Word. As much as I love new things and learning new things, it's a great tool. Don't try to push it aside. Try to figure out how to work with it. I don't know, attorneys, we work in Word, right? Microsoft Word.
We fully embrace Word. Not going to name other word processors or tools that are out there that other vendors use, but we agree. And we were a Microsoft Word centric tool from day one. It doesn't mean we can't ingest other tools, but everybody knows Word. That's the bottom line, and we're not wishing to change that. What's one AI-powered feature that you might love to see in the next few years? And another tough question, but anything that AI might be able to do that you'd love to see?
Well, one of the things I like in I guess regular, I'll call AI tools that we're all out there using, is the ability to have a discussion with the tool. I do that sometimes for brainstorming with ChatGPT or Google Gemini. I will have a conversation back and forth to brainstorm, and I think we process sometimes verbally, and thinking and through conversation. And so I haven't seen a CLM tool yet where I could talk through the agreement, talk about the company's interests and concerns, and how do I address them here and there. And actually almost like I'm sitting down with another legal colleague. I think that would be, pretty cool tool, especially for in-house attorneys who don't always have as many colleagues to go to, like working in a law firm. There's tons of attorneys doing this and all this expertise, but really wasn't something I had thought about a lot in the past, but since it's something I've been using in other AI tools not connected to CLM, I think it'd be really interesting to be able to talk through issues, literally talking through them, right, with the tool to get ideas. So
we agree, and conversational AI is something we're looking to embed deeper, just in a very simple contextualized example, as opposed to typing into your keyboard a question, asking the CLM tool, our CLM tool, hey, Volody, where have I seen this clause before? And to us, that's a powerful way, an even more important way to embrace that user interaction in a meaningful manner. So we are looking at adding conversational AI, again, not to make the decisions, but to further enhance the interaction between the legal team, the procurement team, the sales team, maybe even the finance team. Finance wants to know, well, where are my limits of liability greater than N number of dollars? Yeah. Ask the question. And up pops the answer. We have those capabilities today via our interface, but we're looking at adding conversational AI. So, and again, well stated. Looking forward, maybe the next 3 to 5 years, what do you believe contracting, legal ops, and AI will look like? Tough question, but will contracts become self-executing, or will you continue to see, I'll use the word agentic AI. Agentic means AI learns as it goes and it continues to build, that negotiates autonomously with guardrails. Do you actually see things going that far?
That interesting question. I'm sure my guess is going to be wrong, right? But that's what we do, right? You kind of iterate towards it, looking out there in the future. I'm really curious to see how developed the agentic AI tools get. And I do think that there'll be a level of negotiation through predetermined or accepted maybe playbook guardrails, so to speak, that are built into the system where it knows it can go back and forth, and can acceptably, can accept certain terms. Maybe we try to get better terms first, so iterates through. I really though wonder, what does that look like if the other side is also using a tool like that? What are our contracts all going to look like? There's a lot of debate on, platforms or forums like LinkedIn about what that could end up looking like. I haven't gone too far down that rabbit hole to think of what it will look like, but I definitely think on some simple agreements, NDAs is a classic again, they tend to come back to. I could see some things like that Self-executing, I think that's the furthest away, because I have to imagine, I haven't really thought about that one in the past, but that it could come to an enforceability issue. I mean,
Yes.
the concept of a contract is a meeting of the minds, and were any minds even involved? If agentic AI autonomously negotiates and then it self executes, can computers enter agreements? I don't know about that. I'm skeptical. I mean, humans, companies, and companies are persons in the eyes of the law, right? They're not natural persons. They're other kinds of persons in the eyes of the law. And so, I don't, that's an interesting one. I think that would also eventually be challenged in court, and some contracts law professors will be pontificating on it, and what criteria might need to be there. But I mean, if it's truly self-executing, questionable. Now, I think it could work on the types of agreements that are not likely to be controversial. Would a court really uphold it? That's not always the question, right? Sometimes you need to keep business moving. I mean, I have written up in my office, I'll read it right now. Companies don't have legal issues, they have business issues, right? We are trying to move the business forward. The goal of business is, I hate to say it, everybody, but it's profit, right? I mean, that's how we take paychecks home and all of that. And yes, there's other things that we want to accomplish and enjoy through our careers, but you have to have a profitable business to have a business that stays around. And so that's what we're moving towards, right? So we minimize risk, we don't eliminate them. So simple agreements, maybe people are willing to accept this and they're not likely to be challenged and whatnot. But that's it. I think the agents are going to become really interesting. And I haven't played with those enough yet. Definitely something that is on my sort of like to learn more about list. Self-executing, not so sure there. That's really, that takes it beyond technology to, is that even enforceable, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe smarter people than me have already thought about this and have deeper theories, but I don't know. I don't see us there yet as humans and the legal environment that we operate in the United States. So yeah.
You probably answered this question, but we talk about it a lot. The biggest barrier, and I'll preface this with maybe a statement and see if you agree, but the biggest barrier is there is no legal precedent set for AI to AI contracts. At least in our mind, there's not. We're not.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Not the kinds of things we're talking about. I mean, there are the ethical issues, because an attorney is still, well, in this case, maybe not. But for example, in the litigation situations where briefs had fictitious, cases cited and things like that, attorney is still standing behind that and signing that agreement, right? Is that the case with contracts? I don't know, but
Hasn't been tested yet. And
right.
knows if it ever will be. Yeah. If we were at Volody or any CLM platform, to lack of a better description, go to Mars, what capabilities must we have to stay relevant? I mean, this is an out there one, but yeah, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on who your customers are on Mars, but let's assume that Elon Musk successfully, gets people to Mars, or someone does, right? And there's a colony there, but you're still going to have to work with people, right? Still going to have to work, be easy to use. I think it's a lot of the same things, because it's still going to be humans, and humans are the common element to me of, all of the technological advances in history, right? So user friendliness is going to continue to be the key. And I don't think people on Mars are going to be any different. And to my knowledge, we haven't spotted any new beings out there who will be using these tools. So I think it's going to still be a human tool. And I don't think working on Mars is going to be any different with here, other than, if Mars has a different legal system, then, you might have to learn to work within that one day. So, yeah.
Well, Scott, this has been phenomenal. I mean, the realities are You're clearly well-versed, well-experienced. And for you listeners, Scott said a lot today, but I think you need to take a step back, listen to it, and embrace it, because he hit a lot of the good points. And Scott, again, thank you for digging deep, sharing your thoughts, the vulnerabilities of CLM tools, and pushing us to think forward. Again, for you listeners, if you like this podcast, subscribe to the Counsel Code. Check out Volody.com to see how we embed AI analytics, workflows, business practices, extraction of data, etc. And if your in-house team is looking to pilot CLM with safety and insight, reach out. We're here to help. If nothing else, we can help educate you, similar to the way this podcast is flowed. And hopefully we can work together. Scott, again, thank you for your time, your generosity. Truly look forward to staying in touch. I'll say this again to flatter you, but you talk to a lot of folks, and I got to tell you, you hit the ball out of the park with your responses. And we can't wait for our audience to hear this and react.
Well, thank you, Charles. I appreciate the opportunity to contribute a little bit today to the community, and thank you guys for giving me this opportunity. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.